A modern civil service.
Modern civil service.
A modern civil service.
To me, a modern civil service is one that's ready to lead the UK through the next big challenges.
People that reflect the society that we serve, designing services built around the customer to deliver the outcomes they need.
Skilled,
innovative, ambitious.
A modern civil service.
Hello everybody, my name's Sapana Agrawal and I'm the Director for Modernisation and Reform in the Cabinet Office. And today I'm very lucky to be joined by Catherine Hutchinson. Over to you, Catherine. Can you tell us a bit about you?
Oh, exciting. So my name is Catherine Hutchinson and I am the head of the newly formed, actually I don't know how much I can keep saying it's newly formed actually, Evaluation Task Force. It's a joint Cabinet Office Treasury unit set up to make sure that evidence is at the heart of decision making, which basically means doing more and better evaluations so that we all know what we're doing. Are we spending money in the best possible way? I also have a side job as the head of profession for social research in Cabinet Office, Treasury and Number 10.
Gosh, you sound very busy, Catherine. Sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a modern civil service, right? We're all meant to be doing different things, making sure we make our corporate contribution. But absolutely, the task force is the main thing that keeps us busy, thinking about essentially all the different bits of government and what works, what doesn't work, what we can modify, expand or stop. And essentially, that's £1 trillion worth of government money we're trying to bend to be as effective, which, yeah, does, to be honest, does keep us busy.
So just there, you touched upon what evaluation means. Could you give us sort of your pitch for those of us that don't know a ton about evaluation? How would you describe it?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a bit like, how do you describe your personality? And you never quite know. So for me, essentially, evaluation is like what would have happened if you didn't do the thing. So if you introduce a policy or you introduce a new program, evaluation helps you understand what would have happened given, it's terrible, isn't it? What would have happened if you hadn't have introduced it. So it's something called a counterfactual. It's what would have happened if your thing didn't happen. So you introduced a new policy and did it work? Did it have the impact you think? Did the people you wanted to turn up? Did the policy have the impact that you thought it would, or has there been a backfire effect? So often there are some weird and wonderful things that we do as government and we're never quite sure how they'll land when that policy translates into actual delivery.
I think that was a great explanation, but it does sound quite big.
Yeah.
It also sounds incredibly sensible. So why is it that that's not sort of common practice?
This is true. So I get asked that question all the time. In fact, when I first got this job, my parents said to me, I don't understand how that is a new job. Surely this happens already. What exactly are you doing? And I had to answer exactly the same question. And essentially, I think Michael Gove called us the antidote to the sugar rush of policymaking. And everyone in the civil service is so passionate and enthusiastic and keen that they're doing the right thing that it's almost impossible for us to conceive that we're not doing the right thing, that like actually our assumptions should be tested, or that the way that we're working could be improved, because we're all putting in so much effort and we're all thinking that we're doing something that'll help others. And I think most people in the civil service are quite public sector orientated. So I think it's a combination of us having so much passion in what we do that we don't often stop to challenge our own assumptions. Sometimes evaluation can just be a bit tricky, right? You end up having to spend more time looking at the way you're delivering something, which means you can't give it to everyone all at once because you need to ideally keep a group back that hasn't had it so you can see what would have happened if you hadn't delivered your policy. So that can be tricky about the way policies are rolled out. And also sometimes we just don't know. We just don't know how the best way to do that, to test it. So we've all probably done a survey. We've all probably looked at, a before and after to see what the difference is. But actually, proper evaluation is a true skill and art that you need proper professional input to understand, to be able to give you the best quality advice at the end.
So the way that you just described evaluation, it sounds like it's both forward-looking and mid-process as well as backward-looking. And I think that often when we think about evaluation in government, it feels sort of backwards-looking and cumbersome. But I think what you were describing there could be quite nimble, and you can sort of intersect into your delivery plan as you go. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
You are absolutely right, Sapana. So the best ever evaluations are going to be ones that actually do something useful. The best way to make them useful is for you to be able to feed information as early as possible about what's working, what's not working, who's attending, how's it affecting, all of those sorts of things. So an evaluation shouldn't just be left to the very end where you look back and we all navel gaze and go, oh gosh, that didn't go so well, did it? I wonder what we can do next time. It should be something active. So I used to work in the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. We did lots of rapid RCTs. We did lots of what were called adaptive evaluations. So you try something, you adapt it, you move on, because sometimes in a humanitarian crisis, it isn't just a single point of delivery. You have to be much more nimble. You have to be much more flexible. So we've been trying, I know in government there are lots of other good examples, but you have to keep, with an evaluation, you have to keep doing different new things to be able to feed in that information when it's needed most. Because the worst possible thing is to find out at the end that your thing doesn't work or should have been modified and you have already got your program too far. I think we've all heard of, I don't know, pilots that are doomed to succeed. Like you can't scale back because there's been a big announcement. So you have to be quite clever in thinking about what things you're comparing, and actually it might not be does this thing work or not work, but actually does this thing work better than the alternative? Does this thing work better than a tweak we could give to a policy to make sure it's delivering what it should? So absolutely, at all points in the policy making cycle, evaluation should be there and helping you.
You just use the acronym RCT.
Ooh,
what's that?
That's a good one. A randomized control trial. So essentially, the best example I can give is for medicine. So in medicine, before a new drug is rolled out to be given by people, before a new drug is rolled out to be taken by people, normally half a group of people are given one drug to test and the other half are randomly assigned to take a placebo, which is not the drug, doesn't have any active ingredients. And the reason you would randomly assign is essentially, as I mentioned before, a lot of policies are doomed to succeed. So it's given to people who are already very keen, or maybe actually sometimes are worse performers, to show the difference. But actually, by randomly allocating, it takes out all the bias about who would opt in or who would opt out. It also makes sure that the balance of people who are in and out normally evens out all the other factors about age and weight and engagement and interest and all these other things that might have an impact. So by randomly assigning to have something or not, you create an environment where the two groups who are in and out are the most comparable, and you can create the strongest possible evidence, because any difference between those two groups you can say with absolute certainty is only down to your product or your policy, and that's used in medicine for us to be able to be confident about taking new medicine. And I think we should take that same approach to rolling out things like whether your universal credit benefits new process works, or whether your recruitment process for getting new teachers and retaining them works. So why do we accept something that's less than the best for all those big policies that can make a difference to people's lives when we don't do that for our own bodies, for our own health?
So Catherine, I know this is about you and not about me, but I'm going to share a story.
Ooh.
I've got my own RCT story.
Great.
So I used to work for a tech startup, and we were delivering a form of medicine. It was online therapy, and so we did a randomized control trial around the intervention, which was actually really helpful and powerful for us because it gave us the evidence base. But on the other side of kind of delivering our product, connecting with our customers, given we were such a small company, the barriers to testing felt quite low. So anytime we made a tweak on our website, we would A/B test it. Every time we launched a new feature on our sort of chat forum, it was okay if only 10 people saw it. And if it didn't work and people sort of were angry with us, it was fine, we could roll it back. It feels like in government, it's different. You mentioned before that we kind of announce a policy and then we feel like we have to go through with it, the whole, no matter what. What would your advice be to policymakers to ministers as they're shaping and announcing advice, shaping and announcing policies, that they're done in a way that gives us some like leeway to test and iterate?
So I recently did a talk on this that helped me think about those options, because it is hard. Like, I have had so many failures I'm proud of in government where I've tested things and realised they don't work, that for me it's incredibly important to be able to show people you can be confident enough to share that. So you should be, my top tips are: fail fast, fail small, and fail smart. So fail fast means at the earliest possible opportunity. Like, try and put in testing as early as, because it's so much harder when something has already started a big rollout, something that has gone along far too far. If you can put in testing, if you can suggest testing early on, everyone's sort of waiting for it and expecting it and knows the test may or may not show something. So as early as you can introduce that, the better, because it basically saves embarrassment later. Not that it should be embarrassing, but we are all embarrassed. Failing small. So again, if you can fail when that thing is just in its little baby version, or if you can fail just at a small pilot area, it's again much easier message than your big policy that you have rolled out on scale doesn't work. So when you, just in the same way as you should be failing it early in the process, you should be trying to choose small groups of people to test lots of different versions. Because I would say roughly 1 in 3 things you're going to try work. Because actually, if you're properly innovating, if you're properly trying new things, they should be different, they should be failing, because you should be trying something that, like, we don't know. So actually, if you're testing lots of little things, you up your chances of one of those things working. And you also create, because evaluation basically is all about variation, right? Does this thing work, or that thing? Did it work compared to not doing it? If you create enough variation, you'll probably get a sense of what types of things are working. So your advice when you're having to go back is not just like, oh, I'm sorry, your thing didn't work. It's actually, wow, look at this. We looked at all these different things. Okay, that didn't work, but we've got some promising signals here. So I think always you have to show a door, you have to show a route, you have to enable people to do it in a way that is not embarrassing, that's really low risk, but that also gives them the next steps forward, which is fail smart. So make sure you're evaluating properly, because if you don't evaluate properly, you aren't capturing the learning. And then the next part about evaluating smart is tell people about it. So don't then just sit, oh, that thing didn't work, I'm just going to sit on that. Celebrate it, tell people, because I bet you someone else is trying that somewhere else in the civil service. I bet you, I know this because I've seen so many different ideas recirculating. So we're not just reinventing the wheel, but we reinvent the broken wheel and it carries on. So please, like, we all should have some sort of like my top failures or something, but we should be much more brave and proud. So maybe in the next civil service awards, instead of something that went well, we should have a category for best failure, like something that helps us like challenge our way of thinking, because if you're not failing, you aren't doing your job properly.
It sounds to me, the way that you're describing the role of evaluation, and sort of in light of the declaration and what we mean by a modern civil service, it feels like it's both about being innovative, sort of setting up your ambitions in the right way, but also being efficient and making sure that we're spending taxpayers' money in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think innovation and efficiency are sort of like cousins or best friends, I don't know, some sort of relationship that they have with each other. But if you are trying to make things better, you're trying to be innovative, it's because you want to deliver a better service. So you want to do that. And quite often that means you'll do it more cheaply, right? Or you do it because actually it works better for your citizens. So absolutely, innovation. A lot of people think that evaluation stifles innovation. They're like, oh God, all this testing, oh, we have to follow all these rules, I don't want to do this, fine. But actually, if you do have a good idea, the best way to make sure that, like, when the next leader changes or the next policy changes, that it gets saved is by testing it, because you can evidence it works. Otherwise, it's just basically your opinion compared to somebody else's. And actually, when the music stops and someone else is in charge and they go, oh, look at that funny thing you were doing, and like, actually, is it still worth doing that? You go, oh, yes, it is actually. I can show that it improves productivity by 10% or whatever. But that's important. That's how you make sure innovation gets scaled. That's how you make sure innovation gets embedded, is by making sure you've got proper evidence for it. Otherwise, it's just a lot of exciting beanbags and some opinions.
So saying that, so if we scaled evaluation and we're all sort of busy doing evaluation continuously,
Yes.
how will the civil service look and feel different in sort of 5 years' time?
It's exciting, isn't it? I mean, you can look at places like Amazon or Google and you're basically A/B testing everything, and they've got a really innovative buzz feel to the stuff that they're doing, and everybody knows why they're doing it, and they have a good, actually sometimes the evaluation is really positive reinforcing. It's amazing to hear that your thing is making a difference. I guess we would have a really curious group of people. So just basically it would mean a lot of people asking questions, challenging each other, making sure that we're doing the best. So it's basically like a really annoying combination of maybe Miss Marple and Columbo, I don't know, but always saying, oh, I've got one more question. Could I just check? Do we really know this thing works? And who has it been tested by? What's happening? Something, I don't know why I do that funny voice, because that's probably a combination of Columbo and Miss Marple, but that would be really curious people who are just checking things are going all right.
And making a bigger impact on the lives of the public.
I mean, okay, yes, that's obviously. So we would be saving a lot of money. Basically, a lot of our services would be tested. We'd have really strong confidence, and actually, we'd be a global leader in understanding government services. And in fact, probably we'd be able to be some sort of phenomenal, huge what works centre for what works in government. So we'd have some fantastic evidence about all of the different things that we spend money on that we've just never even thought about before. So yeah, saving money, making the public better, and maybe being Miss Marple.
Exciting. And this might be a difficult question because it might be like asking you to pick, your favourite child. But what's been your favourite evaluation in government? And could you sort of tell us how you went about it and what impact the evaluation had, just to bring evaluation to life?
Okay. So obviously, because it's me, I'm just going to talk about one I worked on.
This is your moment, Catherine.
Exactly.
Do please.
It's quite funny because the team often tell me get over it, Catherine. This has been many years ago now that things have moved on, but they haven't. So really, this is still relevant. So I worked on an evaluation of body-worn video cameras. So I used to work in how to basically evaluate the impact of new technology into policing. So lots of brand new shiny kit. People get very excited, and almost always the answer is it's new kits. People are doing things. Of course, this technology is going to have a massive impact. I did, for those geeks out there, a cluster randomized control trial. So cluster randomized control trials where you randomize not just individual people but whole groups. So with a camera, it's no point if you and me are allocated to different groups and we're on shift together, Sapna, because I'm wearing a camera and you're not. Actually, to be honest, I'm recording you. So the impact basically affects both of us. So you have to put in whole shifts of officers either in the group wearing cameras or not. And the idea was, does it affect their stop and search activity? Does it improve outcomes for criminal justice? Do you get more convictions? And then does it reduce complaints? And then we were trying to look at the effect. And it was a great, I promise you I'm not sponsored by these, but it was a great private sector, public sector combination, because Taser, the company that was producing body-worn video, was so keen to understand basically if their product worked that they leased the Metropolitan Police for £1 2,000 cameras. And they were like, if you do an evaluation, shows it works, it's great for us as a private company because we can then sell more cameras. We're happy to lease for £1 all the kit you need to do an evaluation. Fantastic. So it was a win-win. So the police got to try new bits of kit. We got to test the world's largest randomised control trial into new technology. And also the private sector got a great opportunity to be able to see, and for us again as market leaders to say, actually, this is the feedback in terms of making your product better so that the service when it goes on. Right, what was the result? I actually won a European Public Sector Award for Innovation. You can Google me, it's exciting. But the idea was actually it had, this is an interesting question actually, geeky, but it had no overall impact on stop and search. But it did actually, and when you looked at different boroughs, you could see increase the rate of stop and search in other areas because the police felt confident to be able to do their job, that they knew if someone made a complaint about them, that they would be protected. So I might be looking at someone and think, oh, this is a bit suspicious, should I stop them, shouldn't I? Well, actually, I'm wearing a camera, I can evidence all of my justification for doing it, and if later that person complains about me saying, well, you didn't have, why did you stop me, you can show them and be like, well, actually, look, I can see you looked like you had a concealed item, this is why I did it. So actually the stop and search rate overall looked like no effect, but the real impact was that it reduced loads of unwarranted stops and searches in places like where I lived and increased the number of proactive intelligence-led searches in other places. So often I guess the question in that is my favourite evaluation, not just because it's important for me to promote things I've done, but it's actually because it hides a lot of really interesting findings if you just looked at it overall. The other point, of course, for the things is that it only really works if the officers use it. And quite often officers didn't. They just didn't switch them on. They didn't use them. And so it gave so much more intelligence that people can say, well, this technology could have this impact, but it only has an impact if you get the behaviour right, if you get your policy implementation right. So you can introduce new ways of working, you can introduce new fancy systems, but unless you change culture, unless you get the end user to accept a new way of working, it isn't going to make a difference. So actually later we recommended that we did a trial of training, so to try to increase officer confidence. We did a randomised control trial of the gamification of officer training to try to encourage them to understand their powers and to basically not be scared of being recorded.
That's an amazing story. So how should people go about doing an evaluation? So you just talked about a really interesting example. How did you figure out how many police officers needed to be in your samples? How long did this trial need to go on for? And how long does it take to evaluate the results?
These are very, very critical questions and often really hard to detect. So the basic rule of thumb I use is that you have to be able to see a difference. So that means how big a difference do you think is coming? So if you think your thing is going to be seismic, right, you'd immediately see that. You'd see that really, really quickly, and you don't use so many cases. It's a bit like, how would you know that when you toss a coin, when you toss a coin, that actually it's rigged and there's only heads on it. If you tossed it like 10 times and it was heads every time, you'd probably get a good idea. 100 times easily, you'd know that that was rigged. So it's actually how big an effect. So that's a 50% shift. If it was a heads and tails, you'd be able to pick that up quite quickly. But if you're trying to detect a 10% shift, if you're trying to detect a 5% shift, that's a lot harder. So you need a lot more cases, you need a lot more time to be able to see it. So how quickly, how often does your thing happen? So for a stop and search, they're happening every day. But actually, if you're looking for something that happens really rarely, you have to probably keep it going for longer. So you need to give yourself enough of an opportunity to see a difference. And that depends on how big the difference is and how often your thing that you think will change happens.
Can you tell us a bit about kind of evaluation as an art and a skill? I think you described it as earlier. No, in all seriousness, the way that you're describing evaluation, it sounds quite intuitive, it sounds data-driven, it sounds like we're just supposed to be observant. And I know that there's so much more to it. So can you tell us about kind of the practice behind it, and why is it that we need to engage kind of evaluation specialists to build evaluation into kind of our policy making and our delivery plans?
So essentially, there's a book called the Magenta Handbook, and that tells you all you would need to know about the options for you to evaluate something. And the Magenta Handbook is the sort of guide to the standards for evaluation, and you could take the time out as a policy professional, and you probably should, to read it. But actually, you have analysts in your departments that have already done that and practically done it. So in my example for policing, or actually for anything, checking whether the impact of GP training makes a difference for the number of cancer referrals, whatever it is, there are so many nuances or different ways that you could evaluate it. And when I say different way, you could trial something, you could look at a theory-based evaluation. I can remember being asked what the impact was of British influence post-Brexit. So how can we tell how much influence the UK still has before and after Brexit? There's no way you could trial that. There's no way that you could do it, because there's no half of Britain, or maybe Northern Ireland, but there's no half of Britain that's going into Brexit and out. So you have to think about your methods. You have to think about a range of different ways. We get asked questions like, how can you evaluate the impact of planting a tree? Like, how can you evaluate the impact of a wellbeing measure? I can remember working with the What Works Centre for Wellbeing on measures of misery. and how you can change the average well-being. Do you focus on misery? Do you try to get the miserable people up, or do you try to make everyone slightly more happy? I don't know. So there are all sorts of interesting measures. So how do you check what's happening is working? That definitely there's someone else out there that would know better. So basically we're just saving you the brain ache of trying to work that out yourself. There are lots of different approaches you can take, like with my impact of Brexit, trying to think of a more theory-based. So we've got something called a contribution court, where you can collect all the evidence that suggests something was the thing that changed your outcome compared to all the things that didn't, and you try to put that evidence on trial to understand what's happening, compared to just trials. And trials themselves are beautifully simple, but really difficult. So in the policing example, what do you do if a police officer moves from one shift to another? Are they in or out? What do you do when people leave? How long does the effect last? There's all sorts of questions that you might have to ask that actually there are good technical responses to that someone can help you with, that otherwise can ruin your beautiful because the thing about beautiful simplicity, if I've painted a beautiful magnolia wall and you just splat something on it, I don't know, but a painter and decorator would know how to resolve it. So I don't know where I'm going with this example, but just essentially, don't worry. There are people out there. The beautiful simplicity of an RCT is its design. So it does need someone who understands that design to be able to help you make the best of it. Because one false element of it, one bit that corrupts that simplicity, basically makes the results meaningless.
And so, is your advice to sort of policymakers and delivery experts in the civil service to just reach out to the evaluation task force and to analysts in their department? Absolutely. Essentially, that's what we're paid to do, right? Is to be able to be there to give you advice. We've got the Trials Advice Panel. So we've got a panel of experts externally and internally that can basically give you free advice on any design. If you've got an idea, come to us. We'll help you say how you could test it. I have never yet seen something that could not be evaluated. There's always, that's a challenge, right? But there's always something. The only things that are possible, even, for example, when something's already been completely rolled out, it's there, everybody's using it, fine. So evaluate, scale back, evaluate taking it away. So actually, if everybody's got it, the difference is when somebody doesn't have it. So it sometimes can feel scary. You're like, oh no, I can't take something away. Well, why not? Because that thing actually could be worse or not as good as the alternative that we could be offering. So there is never anything that can't be evaluated. Use the experts you've got and make the most of it, right? Get value for money out of the evaluation task force. And do you think there's something about the way that we as government position evaluation with the public? So you talking about sort of taking something away sounds really scary.
It does.
But sort of being honest with the public that this is about making things better and making sure that we're spending money in the right way and having maximum impact. Do you think we should be changing that narrative a bit?
Yeah, because the biggest, so for trials in particular, and Treasury are particularly keen on trials because they can show with real clarity the exact impact. You can really nail it down, and often they're not possible, but when they are, it's a very good method. We get lots of questions about ethics, but why are you giving that to one group and not the other? Because actually sometimes it shows it doesn't work. And we used to work in Department for Education, we used to get a lot of pressure from parents. Well, why is my child not being able to go on that extra course when other people have, my child's being deprived for the opportunity to get this new policy or programme? And so that comes, again, circles back to our original point, it comes from a real passion that people have, that they think their thing is going to make a positive difference. I suppose it's a bit depressing to think actually it might not, or that actually it might have a backfire effect. But again, I can genuinely think of examples where policies just don't work. They just don't deliver the difference you hope that they do, or that they don't make the difference, or they have an unfortunate backfire. And I think anyone who's ever tried to lose weight or have a new exercise regime or do something, change a habit, knows how difficult it is to get behaviour change. So if you think a policy is often trying to change an entire outcome for a human being out there somewhere, it's really ambitious to think that you could do that, get that perfect first time without testing. So yeah, absolutely. I think that we should probably all have a bit more humility about it, about trying things out. Like I say, acceptance that it might fail, acceptance that we can't get things perfect straight off, and actually we should be trying to do this, and it isn't unethical. Actually, it's unethical just to say, you members of the public are going to get this service we've got no idea the impact of, and we think we're going to get it right first time for you, and we're not even going to check with you, we're not even going to trace this, we're not going to monitor this, you're just going to get this policy and you are going to like it.
From what you were saying, it sounds like the upside of finding out that your policy doesn't work is that you can find out why it doesn't work, and maybe there is an element of your intervention that does work and you can scale that, so it's actually giving you the crumbs to figure out how to pivot and scale the right bits.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's loads of weird interesting facts. MOJ, the ankle monitors, they don't work in summer because people wear shorts. People don't like it, can't go swimming, right? But you would never think about that as a sentencing option, or actually it's going to be more breaches in the summer because you're wearing ankle monitors. There's lots of stuff about colours of pills that help. People have different. It's phenomenal, the evidence on that. There's all sorts of interesting behavioural insight stuff on people paying tax if you shift a single line in a letter. So absolutely, there's all sorts of very small variations. So we're not saying your policy doesn't work. We're not saying you shouldn't have ankle monitors, but think about actually the way you're implementing it to give it the best possible chance of working. So think about all of the variables, think about who you're giving it to, that's about a modern civil service. This is about how we think about our offer to the public we serve. We should be listening to them. We should be thinking about the service we're giving and tailoring it. So we should be representing the people we give. Not often we don't. So actually, when we deliver a policy, it's because we think that someone's going to basically respond in the same way as we would. Well, actually they don't. Actually, people respond in a way that they would, and that often means your policy's not going to work. So we have to learn that. We have to adapt. We have to think and be modern and ambitious and innovative, and try to shift our policies and make sure they are as adaptive as we said, Amazon or Google would. They wouldn't just sell us a product and say, hey, you can have this, you like it or not, and we're only going to let you pick up from your local grocery store. They don't. They do whoosh. They do exciting things.
And just to follow on from that, what does a modern civil service mean to you?
I guess a modern civil service means to me that we are always, if it's modern, is that we're always refreshing and changing and challenging ourselves and embracing new ways of working. So for me, it's about trying things out, being confident to be curious, being, enjoying our jobs, right? You go there, you do it. We get the most out of our jobs when we feel we're doing the right thing. And so I think this is doing the right thing. Testing, trialing, do it, try it. Be innovative, be confident. Wherever your job is, I know I can say but just try something, do it, and know you can feel much more engaged with your area of work if you understand the intricacies and impact. So yeah, that's for me a modern civil service.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was really interesting, and I loved hearing more about evaluation. For those of you listening, if you know somebody who's living modern civil service, has ideas to share or can provide some brilliant examples, please get in touch. We want to hear more about how you're being more skilled, more innovative and more ambitious.